Man, people eat weird stuff, don't they? I'm telling you. All right, so listen, when someone snaps at you, isn't your natural reaction just to snap back at them? Well, yeah. Well, today, Jesus is going to rewire our hearts so that we can give a completely different response. Now, I've had a lot of people, say some really rude and ugly things to me over the years. Most of it is with a phone call, but actually the vast majority of it is over email. It's amazing what people will say when they can hide behind a keyboard. So listen, as a Christian, don't do that kind of thing, okay? So let's not do that. And I was actually going to come up and tell you about one of these emails that I got recently, but then last week I was talking with Pastor Adam, who preaches at our Morton location. He was telling me about something that happened to him just a couple months ago. And I got to be honest with you, I ain't got nothing that beats his story. And so I'm going to tell you what happened to him. So just a couple months ago, he stopped at a Time-Wise gas station to get some gas and walked inside. He was going to go get a drink. And as he was walking in, this older teenage guy walks out, and he recognized him from church. And so he and his family had come to church for quite a while, but then had just disappeared. And so Adam's like, hey, man, hey, how you doing? Hadn't seen you in a while, da-da-da. So they kind of chatted up, talked about it, and then he says, hey, and how's your dad? And that is when the conversation turned. The kid goes, well, my dad's fine, but the reason we stopped going to your church is because my dad hates your sermons. And he goes, yeah, we actually loved everything about the church. My dad just couldn't stand your sermons at all. And so we found another church, and my dad says his sermons are way better than yours. Like, even if you think that, do you actually say that to someone's face? Like, really? And so Adam was like, man, I just wanted to clap back at him right then and just say, like, well, your dad's probably too dumb to understand my sermons. So now he didn't say that. He I mean, he thought it, but he didn't say it. So Adam just simply politely responded, was like, well, hey, you know what, man? I'm just so glad that you guys have found a place that you guys can go and worship Jesus, and apparently Parkway just wasn't that place, and like, that's okay. And so they just, parted ways and moved on. And Adam said, hey, that whole week, I was replaying that conversation in my mind. And then I started thinking about all these like snarky comebacks I could have said, just all the things I bet. He was like, but I knew if I had said them, they'd have been sin. And so I'm glad I didn't. And so I just can't even believe that even happened. But let's be honest, clapping back at someone, firing back an email at them, or snapping back at them, or firing it off an insult, like that's like just some fleshly desire that we all have, right? They insult us, we're gonna insult them. They gossip at us, we're gonna gossip about them. They post something about us, like we're gonna comment right back. Like that's what we do. And we're just defending, and in that defense of ourselves, we can convince us like it's okay, or I'm just defending myself, but really, we're just returning evil for evil. And it's our natural response. Listen, and even though we know it's wrong, we still do it, right? It's just what we do. Or at least we replay that conversation over and over in our minds, and we think about all the snarky things that we could have said, or maybe wish we had said to that person. But none of that is what Jesus wants us to do. In fact, he's got a crazy strategy for how he really wants us to respond. And it's in two very powerful verses in the Sermon on the Mount. So get your Bible out, get your sermon notes out, get your app out, however you're gonna follow along today, and let's read it together. It's in Matthew chapter 5, beginning in verse 38. This is Jesus talking. He says, you have heard that it was said, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. What? Like, who does that, right? Because our initial reaction to getting slapped is to slap back, right? Like, and now, is Jesus saying that if someone comes up to you and they just slap you on the cheek, that you're literally supposed to just turn the other way and go, thank you, sir, might I have another? Like, no, that's really not what he's saying. That's not it. In fact, let's start unpack this a little bit. Jesus begins by quoting a passage in the Old Testament when he says eye for eye and tooth for tooth. He's actually quoting Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 21. Look at it there in your notes. It says, show no pity. Life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, okay? Now, what you gotta understand though, is that this was a command given to the judges of the legal system in the Old Testament era. This is not given to individuals to settle a dispute. This was actually supposed to be used, again, in their legal system to ensure that justice was fair and proportionate. So if like two men are in a fight and, one of them like accidentally, does something and, one person loses an eye, that, then you can't put them to death for that. Or, if you take your fist and you punch somebody in the face and they lose a tooth, like you don't get your hand cut off, okay? So it's to actually restrict revenge and just make sure that punishment is fair and proportionate and essentially that the punishment fits the crime. That's exactly the purpose behind it. But then Jesus comes along and like he so often does, like he just ramps it up. Like he takes things to a completely new level. He tells his followers, there's an even better way. And so instead of keeping score and making sure that, what you did to me is what's gonna happen to you, Jesus basically tells his followers, just let it go. Just let it go. Like, stop keeping score. Stop trying to make sure that everything is fair. Stop making sure that everyone gets what they deserve. Jesus says there's a new way of doing things, and it's based on love and forgiveness. So, if someone wrecks into your car and the insurance covers it, well, then don't turn around and also try to sue them for more money to try to get everything that you can. Or if someone comes up to you and tells you that your preaching is terrible, just let it go and don't respond. That's essentially what he's getting at here. And to give even more clarity, Jesus gives a very specific example. He says, if someone slaps you on your right cheek, okay? What he means, he's not talking about like if two people in an argument and then out of anger, someone slaps the other person. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about something that existed basically in their day and because he's talking about if you get slapped on the right cheek, it means that someone takes the back of their hand and slaps you across the face like this. Now that in their culture was not done out of anger. That's not an anger, that's an insult. And it's a very public insult. And so Jesus says, if someone insults you like that, even if they do it in a super public way, don't insult them back. In fact, you turn the other cheek and let them do it to you again if need be. But whatever you do, you don't insult them back. That's what he's getting at. To which we say, but who does that? Like, who doesn't insult back? I mean, who just sits there and lets them get away with it? Well, Jesus followers, that's who. So let's get into some specifics about what Jesus wants to teach us about all this. So what does Jesus have to say about turning the other cheek? Here's the first thing, write it down. This is your first feeling of the day. It's that getting even never heals my heart. Getting even never actually heals my heart. And look, let's be honest, revenge feels good, right? I mean, at least for a moment. And that's why we try to imagine like the perfect comeback, because we think that that's what's gonna make us feel better. There's something inside of us that makes us think, man, if I could just get even, I'm gonna feel so much better about all this. But have you ever noticed that revenge actually never delivers what it promises? Never. It just doesn't. I mean, would having the perfect comeback, and if you had the perfect comeback and you just put someone in their place, ultimately, does that make you feel better or does it make you feel worse? Yeah, ultimately, it makes you feel worse, because here's the thing. It doesn't remove the hurt. Even if you have the perfect comeback, it does nothing to erase what had been done before. In fact, what it really does is it continues to chain you to that original offender. and you replay that scenario in your mind over and over and over again. And so it does nothing. It does nothing to heal that hurt. In fact, that revenge keeps that wound open because, again, you keep replaying it in your mind. And that's one of the reasons Jesus says, turn the other cheek. Listen, he's not trying to make life harder. He's trying to heal your heart. He's trying to bring a sense of wholeness there. Because Jesus knows that whoever clings to revenge keeps you chained to the person who hurts you. And so, because that person continues to control your thoughts and your emotions and your actions. And you might think you're hurting them, but in reality, you continue to hurt yourself. Listen, they're not thinking about it at all, but you can't let it go. I want you to look at what Proverbs 14:30 says. Look at it there. It says this: a heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones. See, envy, anger, bitterness, resentment, revenge, listen, they eat away at your soul. It robs you of joy. It damages your relationships, and it keeps you from experiencing the peace that God wants for you. And so that's what Jesus is getting at here. So listen, turning the other cheek keeps you out of the danger of letting rot take over your soul. Because listen, every act of retaliation, it hardens your heart just a little bit more every time. That's what happens. And eventually you become the kind of person you just are so easily offended. Or you assume the worst. You're slow to forgive. You constantly keep score. And really, like, who wants to become that kind of a person? And so it literally rots us from the inside out. So the world says get even, but Jesus says, get free. Get free. Turning the other cheek isn't about losing. It's about refusing to let someone continue to control you and rot you from the inside out. Because revenge, it never does anything to heal your heart. So that's the first thing. And here's the second thing. Write this down. Is my response reveals what's in my heart. My response actually reveals what's in my heart. Like, one of the biggest misconceptions about revenge and, making a snappy comeback is that, when someone says an insult to you, you think, oh, well, now I know who they really are. No. Your response back to them says way more about you than it says anything about them and their original insult. In fact, I want you to look at what Jesus says in Mark chapter 7. He went on, what comes out of a person is what defiles them. For it is from within, out of a person's heart, that evil thoughts come: sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, and folly. All of these evils come from inside and defile a person. Have you ever had someone lash out at you and then you just say something really fast back, and you're and you cover your mouth and you're like, oh, where did that come from? Jesus would say, well, I know exactly where that came from. It came from your heart. Because whatever you say in that moment, that's what's really inside. That's what's really inside your heart, especially in those moments where your emotions overpower your filter. For instance, you ever squeeze an orange? What comes out? Okay, this is not a trick question. What comes out? Yeah, orange juice, right? Because that's what's inside an orange. And so whenever something happens and the emotion of the moment squeezes you, whatever it is that comes out, that is what is really inside. And so what happens in that moment says a whole lot more about you than it says anything about them. For example, when someone cuts you off in traffic, what comes out. Especially if there's no one else in the car and it's just you and there's no need for a filter. But that's what's inside your heart. And that's what Jesus says here, you know? Or if someone types you an ugly email, you get that email and you start to read it, and you immediately think of the snappiest response, and you're like, and then before you hit send, you go, delete, 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 delete. Listen, all of that stuff that you originally typed, that's what's in your heart. That's what's in there. Because it's what comes out of you reveals what's actually in your heart. And that's the part that Jesus wants to address. So that's why Jesus is so concerned with your response. He's not just trying to improve your behavior, he's trying to change the content of your heart. And so he says, turn the other cheek and don't respond. And that begins to change the condition of what's inside. Here's the third thing Jesus says about turning the other cheek. Number 3, Jesus says that I take care of the person and I need to let God take care of the revenge. I take care of the person and let God take care of the revenge. Like one of the biggest reasons we struggle to turn the other cheek is because we don't want the other person to get away with it. And so if we don't teach them a lesson, I mean, who's going to? Like, they're going to get away with it. They're just going to do it again. To which God says, so? And we're like, but God, don't you understand? I mean, they're getting away with it. I want you to look at this powerful passage in Romans chapter 12. Because remember, you got to remember, when someone says something to you or they send you an email, listen, it's not like God doesn't see, okay? God can read email. He sees and knows all of it. Like nothing is getting by him. And he knows that other person's motives. He knows their hidden thoughts. He also knows what's in their past that triggered them to actually say that thing to you or respond to you that way. And so look at this passage in Romans 12. It says this, do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it's written, it is mine to avenge. I will repay, says the Lord. And so, why should we just turn the other cheek and let God take care of it? Because God sees what you cannot. He sees inside that person's heart. He knows their hidden motive. He knows what's really on their mind, their hidden thoughts. He knows what's happened in their past that's triggering them to lash out at you like they did. God can see all that. You can't. And because you can't, that just makes you want to clap back at them in revenge. And God says, no, turn the other cheek. Let me deal with them. I will deal with them in my time. Might not be your time, but I will deal with them in my time. You just need to trust me to deal with them, by the way, just like I dealt with you when you did that to someone else. So we let God control all of that. So turning the other cheek, listen, turning the other cheek is not weakness. It's actually faith. It's faith that God's going to take care of it in his time, and I trust him. That's what it is. And it also sets you free, finally free from being controlled by that other person's responses. So here's the last reason why turning the other cheek is so important. Write it down. It's because Jesus did it first. Man, Jesus did it first. Like when Jesus says turn the other cheek, like, listen, he's not describing something that was hypothetical. He describes something that he himself would soon do. Because as Jesus stood before the Jewish leaders, the religious leaders, and the Roman authorities, They insulted him. They hit him. They pulled out portions of his beard. They spit in his face. They pushed a crown of thorns on his head. They whipped him within an inch of his life, and then they crucified him to a cross. And if there's anybody in the world that had any right to respond in that moment, like, it was Jesus, right? But I want you to look at how Peter describes what Jesus did. In 1 Peter 2:23, when they hurled their insults at him, that's Jesus, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. Wow. Like, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. Like, he knew ultimately justice belongs to God. And he could trust his heavenly Father to take care of it in his time. And so therefore, Jesus was able to respond with grace instead of revenge. And listen, like I said, if anybody in the world had the right to respond with revenge, it's Jesus, because he was completely innocent. He had done nothing that they had accused him of. Every accusation was false. Every blow and wound was undeserved. But listen, Jesus wasn't there to win an argument. He was there to forgive sin. And so he turned the other cheek and said nothing. And so when Jesus went to the cross and he allowed all those things to happen, he could have stopped it in a nanosecond. He could have called a legion of angels from heaven and they'd have wiped everybody out. But he remained silent and did nothing because he took your place on the cross. He took my place on the cross and died for your sin, my sin, for the sins of everybody in the world. But in order to receive that forgiveness that he paid for, you have to ask for it. You have to ask Jesus to come into your life to forgive you and then commit to following him. So have you ever done that? If you haven't, there's a prayer that you can pray. It's in your message notes at the bottom. And if you are ready, I want you to pray that prayer right now. And if you do pray that prayer today, then after the service is over, I want you to come down to the front of the stage. We've got some people that have some free materials they want to give you to help you know what to do next. And if you're watching online and you pray that prayer, then I want you to text the word Christ to 50906, and we will email you those very same materials. But we turn the other cheek. Listen, not because it's easy, not because it's natural, because it's not, and not because other people deserve it. We only turn the other cheek because that's what Jesus did, and we needed him to. But listen, you got to keep in mind that the reason that somebody insults you or hurts you or is snarky to you or snaps back at you, it's probably because something has happened to them in their past, and they're really responding to that more than they are responding to you. But you don't know what that is, but God does. And so that's why you leave it to him and do nothing about it. And that's also why on September 13th, literally just about a month, we're gonna kick off a big fall sermon series. It's called Blessed Are the Spiraling. Because listen, aren't there things in life that cause us to spiral downward? Absolutely. But when we are spiraling downward, we are at the perfect place for God to do something amazing in our lives. We are finally at that place where we're so desperate that there's nowhere else to turn, and so we turn to him. And so I want you to be thinking about who you can invite to come to that series. Again, it kicks off on Sunday, September 13th, and it's going to be phenomenal. I'm so excited about it. So when it comes to turning the other cheek, the world says, like, who does that? Well, the answer is Jesus did. And so should you. And so should I. All Christians should. And just in case we aren't tracking with it, in the very next verse, Jesus tells us to go the extra mile. And we're going to pick it up right there next Sunday.